When we opened the actual cafe, people were like, okay, you guys are mental. There's no coffee shop here for a reason, like, you know what I mean? The Heights is shady. And I was like, well, that's all we can afford. And I think with that view, this neighborhood can only get better. And I'd bought in the neighborhood too, right? I bought an apartment down the road here on Palisades, so I figured it was my way of sort of like doubling down on my own investment, if you like, was to like commit to this neighborhood. Would have definitely had skinny jeans on, mate. There's no doubt about that, yeah. My name's Travis. I'm from Birmingham in the United Kingdom. I've been living in the States for, bloody hell, mate, 25 years now, a long time. Not long enough to change my accent though. And yeah, I own a specialty coffee roasting company called Mod Cup Coffee. We're based in Jersey City, the lovely dirty Jersey with these magical buildings, as you can see behind us here. I wasn't always in coffee. I used to sell artwork for like 10 years of my life. And then moved out of that and had a eureka moment with coffee at a coffee roastery in Toronto. And that was a mad experience. I was renting a house in Toronto for 3 months and I smelt weed coming over the fence. And so I popped my head over the fence and said to the geese, can I have a drag on that, mate? And he said yes. That dude ended up being a coffee roaster that owned a coffee company called Merchants of Green Coffee in Toronto. We started talking, he was like, you've never had a proper cup of coffee in your life, you, mate. I know everyone's gone through that experience. You've been seeing this bean get ground, but you don't make a correlation to the fact that the bean is a seed and the seed of a fruit until at some point in your life when you go, oh, okay. And I came back to Jersey City and was like, where am I gonna find that similar experience here? There was nowhere here, and there was very few places in New York City that I could find that experience. And so I was like, well, fuck it, then I'll do it. I rented this place back in 2012. And it was, when I took it on, it was like some kind of Italian tomato storage place where this dude was importing like tinned tomatoes from Italy and stuff. And there's a room here on this side, and then the whole garage. Me and my dad renovated the office into a bedroom because I'd met a guy called Justin who helped me start Mod Cup. And we'd met at William Boots' coffee roasting class. And so I asked him, he was in a band, I was like, would you come to Jersey City and help me start this company? I've got this truck coming. And he was like, well, I'm in a band and we're going on tour at the end of the year, but I'll come up for a couple of months and help you start it. So that's why I built the room so that he could live in there and put a shower in the back. In the little kitchen area at the back, we had like a little drum barrel 2-pound Ambex roaster that we were roasting all of our coffees on, that we were buying from either Coffee Shrub or Royal Coffee, right? Within like 4 months, we were like, this little 2-pound roaster's not really gonna cut the mustard, we need a larger one. So we bought an Ambex 10 kilo and we installed that by blasting a hole in the roof here and roasted. And so we, basically ran roasting out here for about 18 months before we moved on to another garage. Because we took a second garage before we actually got like legit. This is the way we used to drive every morning with the cart attached to the back of the Jeep. And the espresso machine we had to like secure to the cart with like luggage straps. This is crazy. So the espresso machine that we used on the cart, back then in 2013, there was no 120 volt espresso machines that you could plug into like a generator. And so we had to find a solution to that. And the solution we found was that we brought in from Italy propane powered espresso machines. So every morning, the propane tank would be attached to the cart, right? And in the morning, we'd open up the propane tank and then light the flames from underneath. And there'd be naked flames under the boiler to heat the boiler in the morning. But on the waterfront, we got loads of wind. So we'd have to like build barriers around the espresso machine to stop the wind blowing out the flames. It was Liverpool, so there wasn't any real sort of electrics needed. We ran the grinders off of a car battery, the kettles off a car battery, the record player off a car battery that we'd have to charge up every night. I've still got those espresso machines, by the way, sitting in the garage somewhere. First 6 months of operation, that's all we had was the cart and a license to vend in Hoboken, right? Mate, we were lucky if we did $250 a day, like, you know what I mean?
Take it, Satch.
The term mod is a British subculture term that refers to a generation of kids post-Second World War that became really influenced by Italian culture and American culture, really. And my old man was heavily into like mod culture when I was a kid, and my mom listened to a lot of Motown, so. And then of course I was sort of brought up in the late 80s, early 90s, and there was like a resurgence of mod appreciation with the advent of like the Jam and Paul Weller and, you know, then Oasis. And yeah, so I got really influenced by that. But I liked that it could stand for mod culture, which is stylistically, but it could also stand for modern coffee too.
Is this the first location?
Yes. Yeah, this location's been here 13 years now, which seems like a lifetime, and it's been through many different iterations in its time too. This here is the very first direct trade bag of coffee we ever bought from La Palma El Toucan in like 2015, 16. And so we kept that bag, and it's been on the wall ever since as like a, you know, like, yeah, it felt like a big deal to us to buy our first ever like coffee directly from a farm as opposed to like a trader. Yeah. This like 2 bay windows was what I loved about this store. This park here is called Riverview Park, and it's beautiful and like looks right over New York City, like an epic unparalleled view. Anyway, we used to brew in that park like AeroPresses every Sunday morning at a farmer's market. 4 of them, we like pistons. And so I used to look across at this storefront and be like, yo, that storefront is gorgeous, man. If we ever get like enough people where we're making enough money where we could open a cafe, I want that spot. And, you know, sometimes it's weird, isn't it? How just things kind of like work out. And like 3 months after I'd said that, this store became available for rent. And I was like, yo, it's available for rent. It's available, let's get it. But this window here became like an art installation window because the area is filled with a lot of creative people. One of which was we took a mannequin and he dressed it in like 60s gear. And then we chopped the head off the mannequin and suspended it on wire. So it was like 2 feet above the mannequin sitting on a chair. And we put a little sign on the window that said, coffee so good, it'll blow your head off. And so this park here, which is beautiful now, opposite the cafe, like back when we first started 13 years ago, it like it wasn't as nice as this. Like none of these paving ways were here. I don't even remember if that fencing was there, to be honest. It was like, yeah, a bit sketchy. We were trying to roll with this little stainless steel cart all over New Jersey, just anywhere we could to brew coffee, basically. Anywhere where people would accept us, anywhere where we could get in. But then everyone would say to us, mate, about 20 people show up to that farmer's market, you're gonna waste your time. I was like, well, it's down the road from my house and it's down the road from the garage that we roast to. So like, why not give it a shot, man? And it quickly became the busiest farmer's market that we went to. For me, when I looked at this park, I was like, how can it not work here? I mean, look at that view. Epic view in New York City from the park. So I was like, how can it not work here? It was in my own head. When we started the company, right, I was like, look, I want to roast coffee live in front of people. That's what I want to do. So me being mad again, I decided that the best way to approach roasting coffee live in front of people was to go and find a vintage truck and install a roaster on the vintage truck and drive around roasting coffee in front of people and telling people like, you haven't had proper roasted fresh coffee, like, you know what I mean? But it took so long to get that done. The truck became like this mythological thing, you know what I mean? That I don't think people actually believed us. I'd be showing them pictures, they were like, he's bullshitting, he ain't got that truck. And then of course, 18 months later, the truck was finally finished and we took it out and people were like, there's the fucking truck. So it was cool, man. Welcome to the Thunderdome right here. This is the centerpiece, I guess, of Mod Cup Coffee, a restoration project that took 2.5 years in gestation to the final product. What you have is a 1969 Citroen H-Van that we imported from Normandy, France 2 years ago and had fully restored into North America's very first mobile coffee roasting truck. There are other Citroen H-Vans in the country that I believe so. Before I get into answering that question, I want to pick up on something you said, and that is that we've opened 4 locations in 12 or 13 years, and that seems like a lot of growth. And to me, it doesn't. It seems like we should have opened like 10 or 15 shops. Do you know what I mean? But we haven't, and we've opened 4, there's a number of reasons as to why that's been that way. But yeah, there was a number of moments over the past 13 years where I'm like, holy shit, is this ever really gonna click? Do you know what I mean? 2016, I got divorced. That was a challenging time for me. I got a kid who's 5. 2019, the guy that helped me start the company went back to Ohio. So now I've got to start again with the new roasting team because he was roasting. Then 2020, COVID hits, stopped shit for like 3 years. I had to close the cafe that we already had existing in the financial district because of the fact no one ever came back to work. But ultimately, I think, not looking for explosive growth and to open 6 or 7 and try and nail down the ones that you've got to start with has actually benefited us rather than being a hindrance. But talking about kind of like the lineups that we bring in these days, I feel very comfortable that where we're at with the producers that we've managed to establish ties and relationships with, I mean, I've been on some Origin trips and they've all been amazing, but obviously going to the source of everything and just such a beautiful, beautiful, truthful, honest country as Ethiopia. And yeah, of course the coffee was great and seeing the producers was amazing. But for me, the whole package of what you took us to, it was so good. And he said himself, he was like, that was that's one of those ones you take to the grave. And I didn't know who he was. He's just a guy that had traveled to us, right? And he said, I want to say this to you. He goes, there are plenty of coffee companies that say that they serve specialty coffee, but your lineup of retail on that shelf right there, fucking elite. He was like, you've got Café Le Granja, you've got Pepe Gijon, you've got Alo, you've got heavy hitters on that shelf and lots of them. He's like, this is a true specialty shop. I'm like, it is, don't get me wrong, but still 80% of the people who come through my door, mate, are ordering iced lattes, which is fine. And the funny thing with that as well is that when we first started the company, mate, we were so fucking high on mighty, mate. No fake sugars, no half and half, just whole milk and almond milk, no other options. There was a lot of no's, you know what I mean? When I look back on that, I'm like, I wouldn't change how we began, how we started. Because I think looking back, it was important for us to try and establish up front early when we started that we had standards and that we're not going to allow those standards to drop. But I will say this, I think that we held on to those rules and those no's for maybe a little too long. Because the more you say no to people, you're less in your ability to turn people on to maybe what specialty coffee can be, because they ain't going to come. You know what I mean?
Slip inside the eye of your mind. Don't you know you might find a better place to play? You said that you
And the wild thing is that this place used to be a dog washing place, and the place in Palisade was also a dog washing place before we took it too. How mad's that?
Do you want my cup?
You cup the mud.